What's going on, guys? It's Zoko and I'm back with a new Cyberpunk hacking video. Now, my previous guide was extremely basic. It was not meant to be something very thorough or in-depth, so I wanted to do an updated version with a focus on hacking multi-sequenced puzzles. So in this video, we are going to start with a quick overview of the basics to try to get anyone lacking up to speed, and then I'm going to go over some examples of puzzles and my thought process when going over these multi-sequenced hacks. There's some really good information regarding strategies to use here, so make sure to stick around. And if you're wanting regular Cyberpunk guides, consider subscribing because I do content like this all the time. Okay, so first off, the basics. The goal of the minigame is to get one of these sequences at the side here into the buffer in order. It doesn't matter where in the buffer it starts, as long as the combination listed isn't broken up. For instance, you need 55, E9, and 7A to complete this first sequence. It doesn't matter if you started with BD or 1C. If after that you had 55, E9, and 7A, this sequence would complete. But if you started with 59 or 55 and E9, and then before you did 7A, you did like BD or 1C right here, and then did 7A, that sequence would not complete because it's not together. Now, when choosing numbers within the matrix, you always start at the top row. And when you pick a number from that row, your next pick comes from the column that that number within the row is in. And when you pick a number within that column, you go back to choosing one from within that number's row, and back and forth until you fill up your buffer. So row, column, row, column. Talking about the buffer itself, your buffer is basically your attempts to complete the puzzle. You start with 4 slots, so you have 4 attempts. Biggest upgrade I have found is 8 slots or 8 attempts. At the moment, I am rolling with 6 buffer slots. For me to get 3 completed sequences or more, there usually has to be some sort of big overlap with the sequences so I can knock off a couple of them easily. Regardless of my less than optimal cyberware, the strategies I employ would be the same for 8 buffer slots, and I know I would regularly crush puzzles with those extra 2 attempts. Now, if you find the puzzle kicks you out before you use all of your buffer slots, the game is simply telling you the solution to a sequence is now impossible with your remaining buffer slots. So we are going over multi-sequence hacking. The first of 2 tips I would give anyone trying to get better at this is to increase your buffer size via Ripperdoc upgrades. As soon as I upgraded to a 6-slot buffer, I started doing many more multi-hacks. If you don't upgrade, any multi-hacks are going to be next to impossible. Again, there are also a handful of cyberware upgrades that give you an 8-slot buffer, which is where you really start to shine with the multi-hacks. The second tip is to really look at the puzzle first. I say that because when you first enter the game, the timer does not start until you actually pick something, which allows you to examine all of your options ahead of time. I honestly trace through the combinations available to me pretty quickly, and when I find something I am able to chain together, I go after it. Now, obviously, when you're going after 3 or 4 sequences in the same puzzle, it can be much more confusing because it is a lot to keep up with. But like with anything, you get better with practice. I also never spend too much time looking for the perfect solution, but I do look for a couple things to get started. First, when going for multiple sequences, I check for any coding overlaps. A lot of times I'll start with a sequence that ends with a number that begins another sequence. This effectively saves me a buffer slot, which is always a good thing when going for as many sequences as you can squeeze in. If you're having trouble finding number combinations, hovering over the number in the sequence menu will highlight the same number in the matrix. Alternatively, hovering over the number in the matrix will highlight all those numbers in the sequence menu. For this first example, I'm going to use one where I realized it wasn't going to be perfect. If I had 8 buffers from cyberware, this would have been relatively easy, but I don't, so whatever. So when the puzzle pulled up, I realized I had a 4-number sequence and 2 sequences with 2 numbers, whilst I only had 6 buffer slots. I am likely going to take a loss unless I find multiple coding overlaps, which I realized I only saw one of. And that overlap goes from the 4 sequence number of the version 3 data mine to the version 1 data mine. Once I notice that, I just accept it's not going to be perfect and I cruise on through. But I came to that conclusion fairly quickly. I didn't see much sense in wasting time. You will also notice at the end I have 1 buffer slot left, and since I need to make 2 picks for the last sequence, the game recognizes the failure of that data mine and completes the minigame. Now, this is a good one. This maybe should have gone at the end. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below if this should have been the grand finale. But for this hack, I have 3 sequences. Right away, I notice multiple overlaps. I notice the low-level data mine ends in a number that the highest one starts with. Also, data mine version 3 ends in a number that version 2 starts with. But, and this is where you really have to pay attention, version 2 ends with the number that version 1 starts with. And version 1 ends with the number that version 3 starts with. So I can complete the version 1 sequence at the same time I am making progress on the other puzzles because of the overlapping numbers. Make sure to look at the sequences when I am picking the numbers. You will see the overlapping numbers being tapped at the same time. Before we go over the last one, if you have made it this far, consider hitting that thumbs up button. I would really appreciate it. Any criticism on how I can improve is also welcome in the comments below. This final example is part of a mission. I'm going to cut out the message that pops up at the end to avoid any potential spoilers, but conceptually, the strategy is the same. I also don't know if the minigame for this mission is randomized. I know the minigame usually itself is, but this may be different because it's a mission. I don't know. Anyways, my primary mission related goal here was to do that bottom data mine where it says copy malware. Everything else besides that is gravy. So I'm looking for solutions off of that primary goal. And what I noticed right away is it ends in 55 and another data mine starts in 55. I also noticed that data mine version 3, which is the other 4-numbered sequence, starts in FF, which I can't chain off of my other data mines. And being that I have to get this 4-number sequence for the mission, that other 4-number sequence is kind of out of question for my 6-slot buffer. On top of that, the 3-number sequence ends in the number that the lowest level data mine starts with. So realizing all of that, I had a decent amount of hope that a multi-sequence hack would be successful. So like with any of these, I just start tracing through the possible combinations, looking for the best solution. Once I find a solution, I go over it like 3 times before clicking any of the numbers. Again, the timer is not going to start until I pick something. I do this to memorize where it's at, but I still go fairly slowly when actually making my picks to make sure I don't have any misclicks. Practice makes perfect. If you guys are looking for a ridiculous weapon that can one-shot anything in the game, not kidding about that, consider checking out the video popping up on screen right now. Until next time.